Hey guys, Station X here, and today we're going to be unboxing this box. So let's just take a look at the side here. Well, look at that. It says Lost Episode on it. Let's open this up and see what's inside. Well, look at that. A lost episode, apparently. Could this be my lost episode of Station X R20? I do remember recording something I never uploaded, but must have lost this somehow. Well, we're gonna take a look at it with this. I know I modded this to play Xbox games, so don't worry, we will be able to take a look at this. Let's get that out of here, and let's put this in. I'm curious to see what's inside it. Maybe it has something to do with the Xbox, who knows? But in all seriousness, actually, something I do want to mention is that we are coming up on the 1 year anniversary of the channel, and I gotta say, what a year it's been. Since starting it, I've never thought I'd actually do anything like to this extent, growing an audience, having as many videos on here as I do. I honestly did not think I was going to make it this far, but with the amount of comments I've seen of people liking it, enjoying it, and just having a good time, and I've had a good time making the videos, I'm just very happy to see that the channel has, some kind of merit at the very least, that people do enjoy. And it fills my heart because honestly, in real life, I'm a very shy person. I'm not very comfortable talking in front of a camera or being in front of a camera or even behind a camera, as you can see. So to have a channel with 224 subscribers as of recording this video is just something that amazes me personally, because I just never thought I would ever even get to that amount. We started with, I think, at least 10 subscribers to the channel, and that was just friends and family. But without further ado, I do actually have a lost episode, unboxing, or just a video that I made that never saw the light of day, and I figured as a last episode before the year is up, for at least for first year of it being on here, I figured I'd show it off here today. Is the lost episode of the Xbox 360 and my thoughts and opinions on that console. But without further ado, if you want to, let's get to the video. Start it now. So in the 6th generation of consoles, Sega decided to drop out of making consoles and just focusing on games. And from that, kind of had an opportunity for Microsoft to fill in a missing part of the pie, and that being just making the original Xbox. Now, the fact that it did pretty okay over here made way for the fact that they could make their second console, the Xbox 360, what could possibly be the most fond of and looked back at console to most fans of Xbox. The 360 is where Xbox Live really grew into its own. The 360 cultivated so many friendships and online experiences, really paved the way for party chat to be a really usable thing now. I mean, if it wasn't for Xbox 360 and Xbox Live with this console, who knows what online gaming and chat would be like today. So this console, I feel like, is responsible for a lot of modern things that the video game market has. But it does have some ups and some downs, and we're going to be discussing that here on the third part of our Xbox discussion, celebrating the 20th anniversary of Xbox. Like in the last video, since there's 3 different models, we're just going to break it down into each one. But I mean, I feel like just by looking at these, you're kind of already going to tell we're mainly going to be talking about these two. As for this, did not last very long, and I could tell you why. Without further ado, let's get right into the video. So we're going to start this off by talking about the original model. This model came out in November 2005, and it came out like pretty much a year before the other competitors like the Wii and PS3, starting off the 7th generation. It was cheaper than the PS3. Really, honestly, with that year and price point of it being cheaper, that the Xbox 360 was $250 to $300, I believe, and the PS3 was $600. That being because of the fact that it had a Blu-ray player in it. See, because Sony was very high off the success of their first two previous consoles, so they felt like they had the advantage. They already have a player base, a loyal player base to buy their products. They've won the first two fairly easily, and they just kind of thought they were untouchable at that point. So it kind of paved the way for 360 to kind of take advantages of the things that made PS3 very icky to deal with. For one being, the PS3 was $600, and that was just way too expensive in 2007. And that's another thing, is that this thing came out like 2006-7. So it had about a year or two to sell consoles during that time. Not to mention that the 360 was the most prevalent point of Microsoft having exclusive games. It's not like the Xbox One and PS4 where that was heavily lopsided. It was about even here. Each had its own contender for that. So you had people who liked the Xbox exclusives, liked the price point, but not to mention that it was just easier for developers to make games for this thing compared to the PS3. PS3 had so much garbage in it that just kind of made it complicated and hard to make games for. Oftentimes, developers would just make the 360 version of the game first, then go on the PS3 version, and the PS3 version would be highly, inferior to the 360 one. Oftentimes, the PS3 version would be buggier or messed up and just not working right. I mean, an infamous game like the Orange Box that did really well over in 360 had a PS3 version that not many people knew about, and Valve had to get EA to help them run the servers on Team Fortress 2, which was a game in that package. And it was just unheard of to me that they would just need help like that. So, I mean, Gabe Newell himself famously said that PS3 was just complicated as hell and was just not worth the time and effort doing that for. The 360 took advantage of the early flaws of the PS3. Of course, throughout the life cycle of the 360 and PS3, they would go through gradual changes. But if we're comparing it from their original models, the 360 had those great advantages, but it also had its biggest flaw. I mean, for one, early versions of this did not have HDMI. This one, I believe, does. I actually don't remember. Yeah, it does. This one does have HDMI, but early versions of it didn't. They would eventually add an HDMI to this model, but it was also, you had very low storage spaces on these things, like these right here, which were removable from the top, by the way, which I always thought was cool. These were always very small. They didn't have lots of storage space, so, people who complain about that for modern consoles had the same exact problem back in the day as well. Of course, this would eventually just be an issue that wasn't worth mentioning. But the biggest thing, the biggest problem that persists to this day with this original model is the Red Ring of Death. Everyone's heard of it. It's the most infamous console malfunction, I think, of all time. I feel like even more infamous than the dreaded blinking light of the NES. Although that hasn't a reason for why it happens. I mean, the thing's old as hell. It's 30 years old at this point. Whereas this thing would get Red Rings of Death at launch. These things would last maybe a week, a month, however long, and would just die. There was 4 stages to the Red Ring of Death, almost kind of like a sickness. Just, you have 1 ring, you can kind of get by. 2, you're pushing it. 3 and 4 practically mean death to you, although the common one was 3. It is very annoying to get one of these because you would, have a dead system almost immediately after owning it. Now, this didn't always happen. I mean, this one right here lasted so long. Thankfully, this one doesn't have the Red Ring of Death for it being so old, but, I'm too afraid to plug this thing in because I am just terrified that if I do, it's gonna have the Red Ring of Death. Like, it's just that much of a problem. And I believe it's due to the fact that it would overheat a lot and it would just cause something internally to just combust or something. Like it just did not make a good image for the 360. It was just kind of like the failure machine in a sense. But people were able to look past that enough for them to enjoy the system itself. I mean, it did do pretty good. And Microsoft was very good with the fact of replacing these because of the fact that they would offer you a warranty with it. They extended the warranty way more than normal products, so they would just kind of be losing money at that point. They did very quickly switch to a newer model because this thing only, I think, lasted 3 years. But it was just kind of a disaster for that. That was like the one big thing that they had that was just not good. But the thing that was very good, and what really I feel like a lot of people had the most fond memories of, is the next model we're going to talk about. So going into, I believe, 2008 and 9, the Xbox 360 got a revision, and this is the slim model. Of course, this is the Gears of War one. This is my childhood 360. This is the one that I owned as a kid. It was my first ever console that I didn't have to share with my sibling or anything like that. It was just mine. I didn't have to share with family members, nothing. This was like a Christmas gift for me. And so I had so many fond memories with this one, as much as everybody else does. I mean, this is the one that I use to this day. I mean, of course, it fixes the Red Ring of Death issue. It's a lot smaller compared to the original one. I mean, look at how much this one towers over it. And the hard drive situation is different. It's on the bottom now. There's a little door that you pull out the thing with. Quite honestly, and of course, all these have HDMIs in them. If you were going to buy a 360 in 2021, this is the one to buy because of the fact that, for one, it's reliable. Two, this also plays DVDs fairly easily, like HD. There was a joke because, like, the 360 original model, there's something I didn't mention, is that there was HD DVDs, and they had an HD DVD player attachment because it couldn't play it. But this one also does play Blu-rays as well. I've played Blu-rays on here. It works fine. But this one was the one that I grew up with. And now, because of that, I want to start talking about the other big thing that the 360 is very much known for, and that's Xbox Live. Now, Xbox Live didn't start necessarily with the 360. It did start a little earlier than that, obviously, with the original Xbox. But I don't think it was most prevalent then on the 360. And I think because of the way they overhauled the friends list, the messaging, party chats was really big, and just the overall community behind it, I think was just a really special thing that the 360 got to take ownership of. I thought it was so nice. And the fact that PS4 and all these other consoles, apps, whatever, kind of piggybacked off that. I mean, it just goes to show how influential this thing was. Xbox Live to me was a very special thing because of the fact that it helped me gain friends and memories that I probably would have never had if it wasn't for this thing. There are some close friends that I still talk to this day, and I met them through this Xbox. And to me, that's just irreplaceable. And I do the same thing with some of these other consoles that I do, but it's through this pioneering online interaction on gaming systems that really, I want to say, just changed how we see online gaming and stuff like that, at least for me. That's just my opinion, my little hot take on it. But honestly, the 360's online service was really pretty good. Multiplayer was always so much fun on like Halo 3, Call of Duty, Gears of War, the usual suspects. But just also the messaging, I felt like, was very nostalgic for me too, because of the fact that you would always have your friends to do like the message to all players thing. You would go on Call of Duty and get messages about prestige lobbies in Modern Warfare 2, all the toxic hate messages you would also get, which, I mean, that was just kind of part of the course with that. It was very much the Wild Wild West here. There was not very much moderation when it came to the 360, but you had to learn. This was kind of the first of its kind almost, or at least to this scale. So they had to learn through it. And so I just remember it very fondly of just having really good memories with it. I never so much had any super bad experiences with it. I was never really like one of those people who just hated Xbox or anything like that. This is the reason why I would say I'm a little biased towards Xbox. I'm not a fanboy, but I am a little biased towards it just because this helped me through some pretty hard times in my life. And so I honestly have nothing but gratitude for the fact that this version, this specific model, this one that I got to own, I'm thankful that this thing exists. But not being sappy about it, the service was also very good. Everything down to internet connection, games taking advantage of the online factor, and just messaging, party chats, all of that was great. But another thing that was also really good was some of the things that you were able to do, like Microsoft offered games for free when you had Xbox Live, which was also a way for me to expand the fact that they expand the type of games I played. Because for a majority of my time on 360, I practically only played first-person shooters. Not for nothing. I was just really into that kind of game. But without the Xbox Live Games with Gold thing, I would never have experienced things like Sid Meier's Civilization Revolution. I would never have experienced Crackdown. I would have never experienced really Assassin's Creed. I would never have experienced so many other games that I just can't think of off the top of my head, but there was so many games that were free on that service. And of course, the Xbox One expanding on it and putting like original Xbox titles on there too, it was just really nice. And another kind of bonus, they never increased the price of the online service because of that, because they added this thing. And of course, when they were doing the backwards compatibility on the Xbox One, 360 games that were free for gold were automatically backwards compatible. And honestly, what made me switch to the Xbox One, because when the Xbox One came out, I stuck with this thing. I did not buy an Xbox One day one at launch, mostly because of the other issues, but also because of the fact that, I was just a kid back then. I couldn't afford it. I didn't have a job to purchase a whole new brand new system, because when I got this back in 2011. I was pretty much past the prime of the 360's life, but honestly, I don't regret my time on there or how short it was. I stuck with it up until 2015, and then that's of course when I made the switch to Xbox One, and by then they had put in backwards compatibility for the 360, so I could enjoy all my favorite games I was able to on the 360, of course, over time, that is, because the way they did the 360 backwards compatibility, I'm sure everyone knows about that. But it was just such an awesome time on here. And I honestly don't think a console can replicate that for me personally. I hope that other consoles nowadays, future consoles, that be Series X, PS5, Nintendo Switch, or onward, can replicate that for other people, because as far as anybody says what my favorite console is of all time, period, my answer will always be the Xbox 360, specifically the slim model. But there is one more model that they released. They didn't just quite leave it off with a masterpiece, of course, because during this time transitioning to this other model, and of course the Xbox One, they released the Kinect, which everyone loves. The Kinect, it was their answer to getting people who liked the Wii and enjoyed the Wii, the casual market, onto the Xbox as well. And they really heavily focused it towards the end of not only this model, but just the 360 in general. I didn't want to spend too much time on the Kinect because we all know how bad it is. It wasn't really so bad on the 360, in my opinion, but it's more so at its worst with the Xbox One. And quite frankly, it's just a failed attachment that didn't really mean anything once it was taken out. So moving on to the next model, we'll pretty much wrap up the end of the 360's life. And here we have the smallest of the bunch, the Xbox 360e model. This one, if you couldn't tell just by looking at it, it is supposed to resemble an Xbox One. It was released about the same time as the Xbox One, pretty much at 2013, and it surprisingly did not do well. I mean, I'm surprised not. I don't care. Really, I don't have much to say about it because what is there to say? It's just an Xbox 360 Slim, just in the shape of an Xbox One. No one really bought this thing because of the fact that, I mean, for one, the Xbox One itself was, something people didn't want to buy because of how they handled that situation. Of course, I explained that. But this one in particular, just, the fact that it just looks like the thing everyone disliked was just kind of like, who cares? Like, who cares about this thing? No one did. And of course, something that I also didn't mention is that with every single revision, they would change the power outlets. I mean, looking at the original 360, this is what the power outlet looked like. Then you have the 360 with its power outlet. But they also both use the same AV cable situation. And then here you have this one's power outlet, and then they changed the AV cable thing as well. Now, of course, HDMI was fully a thing by this point, so no one really cared about that. But why they remodeled the power consumption port, like, I don't know how many times, just like, confuses me. I don't know why they couldn't have just stuck with the first one, or at the very least the second one they made. I don't know what was the problem. It was still a brick, so I didn't really care. The only time I would have thought that this would have been a nice thing to remodel would have been just making it a regular cord. But no, they stuck with the brick. And that was another thing, the Xbox One stuck with the brick too. It was all intents and purposes the exact same. And of course, they even took away a few USB ports, because this thing, the Xbox 360 Slim model had up to 3 USB ports in the back and 2 in the front right here, where you have your 2 in the front here, but you also have just 2 in the back, so you're missing 2 ports right there as well. So I mean, ultimately, even just by that alone, it's just an inferior version. I mean, I don't think anybody would ever recommend it. Another thing that they changed too is that this is a button, it's not a touch thing anymore, which they did eventually change Xbox consoles to have a button power up thing rather than the touch, like you touch it with your finger. But for not only the original 360 and the 360S, the Xbox One that this is based off of had a touch thing. So why they made it a button, I don't know. This was still touch, the eject button. So I just don't get it. Really, there's just not much to say. I know I'm kind of like, I just spent the whole last few minutes praising the 360S and just kind of clowning on this. But it's not so much that it's bad, it's just why? Why does this exist? Maybe it was a budget thing, a budget version of the console, but even then, it's just like, by the time this released, people who wanted a 360 had one, and not too long, it didn't take very long for Xbox One to have backwards compatibility. Not many people know that. I mean, the Xbox One didn't always have backwards compatibility. It was something they had to add. And even though it didn't happen right away, it didn't take too long to get it. So, I mean, this was just kind of a useless thing they put out. Even in stores, most stores would only advertise this model. This model was the only one I would ever see in stock. This is the only thing I would ever see. So clearly, I mean, this was just a rare model in particular. The only reason why I had this was because someone was going to throw it out and I decided, hey, I'll take it off your hands. And I got it for free. I literally got it for free. I mean, this right here is just kind of a useless thing to exist. And that if someone were to recommend which model should I get, I would honestly just say go with the Xbox One S. It's so much easier to find. It probably would be less expensive because how hard this is, how many they didn't really make. This is probably very expensive compared to the other one. And overall, you just kind of get more out of it with this S rather than this one. And I mean, yeah, that's pretty much it. really, no matter which way you boil it down to, the 360 was a very special console. And at least a special console to my heart and the hearts of many who enjoy gaming during this time. I mean, I feel like some of the best games that I ever experienced, some of my happiest memories playing these games were all on the 360. And while its time has long passed, I will always fondly remember it. And this video, I know, is kind of a little, sappy and tacky with the 360 of how I feel about it, but it really did do a lot of good things for me and other people as well. I know I'm probably not the only person who felt this way, but let me know what you guys think. Did you have good memories with the 360? Which model did you own? Tell me about your experiences playing on the 360, and just let me know what you think about it. I've been Station X, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Well, that was it. That was my lost episode that I never got to upload. I know it's a bit choppy and whatever, but there was a reason why I didn't upload it originally. But I figured it'd be a nice treat. But please let me know what you guys think. As for, the future, we're going to be moving from Season 1 of Station X R20 to going into Season 2. And you know what that means? If we're going to go into Season 2, it's time to take the gloves off here. But in all seriousness, that I got some new ones, so don't worry, the gloves ain't going anywhere. I'll see you next time.